3 nights ago, something happened that completely changed my life. I still don't fully understand it. And honestly, I'm not sure anyone would believe me if I told them the full story. But everything you're about to hear is exactly how it happened. It started during a late evening walk along the shoreline. The ocean was unusually quiet that night. Normally, the waves crashed loudly against the rocks, but this time the water felt almost calm. Too calm. As I walked along the sand, the beam of my flashlight caught something strange lying near the water. At first, I thought it was just a rock, but as I got closer, I noticed something strange about it. It wasn't a rock at all. It was an egg, and not a normal egg. This thing was huge, about the size of a football. Its surface was dark purple, almost black, and faint glowing lines ran across its shell like veins. I crouched down to get a closer look. The surface felt warm. Warm, even though it had been sitting in cold ocean water. I tapped the shell gently with my finger, and that's when the egg moved. Not a little. It actually shifted in the sand. I immediately stepped back. For a moment, I just stared at it, trying to convince myself that I imagined it. But then it moved again. Something inside the egg was alive. Now at this point, the normal thing to do would have been to leave it there, or call someone. But curiosity got the better of me. So I carefully wrapped the egg in my jacket and carried it home. Looking back, that was probably the biggest mistake I've ever made. When I got home, I placed the egg inside a large glass aquarium I had in my garage. I used to keep fish in it, but it had been empty for months. I filled the tank halfway with seawater that I had stored from previous trips to the beach. Then I gently placed the egg inside. For a few hours, nothing happened. The egg just sat there quietly under the light. But around midnight, things started to change. At first, I noticed the glowing veins on the shell becoming brighter. Then the entire egg began to vibrate slightly. Not violently, just enough to make the water ripple. That's when I grabbed my camera. Something was about to hatch. And whatever was inside was definitely not normal. The first crack appeared near the top of the shell. A thin line spread across its surface. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire egg was covered in cracks. I leaned closer to the aquarium, my heart pounding. Suddenly the shell broke open. A small, dark shape slowly pushed its way out. At first, all I could see were tiny tentacles. They curled and uncurled slowly in the water. Then a small head emerged from the broken shell. 2 glowing eyes opened. They looked straight at me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The creature was about the size of my hand. It had smooth, dark skin and several thin tentacles that floated gently in the water. It looked almost like a baby octopus. But something about it felt different. The shape of its head, the faint glowing patterns along its body, and the way its eyes followed my movements. That's when a thought crossed my mind. A ridiculous thought. But the more I looked at the creature, the more it made sense. This wasn't just some unknown sea animal. What I was looking at might actually be a baby kraken. For the rest of that night, the creature barely moved. It floated quietly in the aquarium, occasionally stretching its tiny tentacles. It didn't seem aggressive. If anything, it seemed curious. Whenever I moved my hand near the glass, its eyes would follow. At one point, I gently placed my finger against the outside of the tank. One of its tentacles slowly reached out and touched the glass. It stayed there for a few seconds, almost like it was trying to understand what I was. I won't lie. In that moment, the creature actually seemed kind of cute, which made what happened the next morning even more surprising. Day 1. When I woke up, the first thing I did was check the aquarium. The creature was still inside, but something was different. It had grown. Not a little. A lot. The baby kraken was now nearly twice its original size. Its tentacles had become thicker and longer, and the glowing patterns on its skin had become much brighter. I stood there staring at it in disbelief. Creatures don't grow that fast. Not overnight. But there was no denying what I was seeing. The kraken was growing at an impossible rate. I decided to feed it. At first, I dropped a small piece of fish into the tank. The reaction was immediate. The kraken shot forward with surprising speed. Its tentacles wrapped around the fish instantly. Within seconds, the food was gone. Then it looked back at me, almost like it wanted more. So I gave it another piece, and another, and another. Each time, the Kraken devoured the food faster than the last. By the time I stopped feeding it, the creature had eaten nearly an entire bag of frozen fish. And somehow, it still looked hungry. That was the moment I realized something important. This thing wasn't just growing fast. It was going to need a lot of food. Day 2. The next morning was even more shocking. The Kraken had grown again. Now it was nearly the size of a small dog. Its tentacles stretched across almost the entire aquarium, and the water inside the tank had become cloudy. Something else had changed too, its behavior. The Kraken was no longer calmly floating in the water. It was constantly moving, circling the tank, pressing its tentacles against the glass. At one point, it slammed one of its tentacles against the side of the aquarium. The sound echoed through the garage. The glass held, but just barely. That's when I realized something. This tank wasn't going to hold the creature for much longer. And if the Kraken kept growing at this rate, by tomorrow, it might be too big for the aquarium entirely. Later that evening, I heard a loud splash coming from the garage. When I ran inside, my heart nearly stopped. The Kraken had climbed halfway out of the tank. 2 of its tentacles were gripping the edge of the aquarium. Its glowing eyes were staring directly at the door, at me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then slowly, the creature slid back into the water, almost like it had been caught doing something it wasn't supposed to. That's when I started to feel uneasy, because it meant one thing. The Kraken wasn't just growing, it was learning. And if a baby Kraken was already this strong after only 2 days, I didn't even want to imagine what it would look like after a week. But the truth is, things were about to get a lot worse. Because later that night, the aquarium glass finally cracked. The crack in the aquarium glass started small. At first, it was just a thin white line spreading slowly across the corner of the tank. I stood there frozen, staring at it. The Kraken was moving restlessly inside the water, its tentacles sliding across the glass walls as if searching for something. And every time when those tentacles touched the cracked area, the sound grew worse. Tick, 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 tiny sounds. But each one felt like a countdown. I grabbed a bucket and tried to scoop water out of the tank, hoping to reduce the pressure on the glass. But before I could finish, one of the Kraken's tentacles slammed against the side of the aquarium. The entire tank shook violently. Then the crack exploded across the glass, and the aquarium shattered. Water flooded across the garage floor. Fish containers, tools, and cables were instantly soaked as hundreds of liters of seawater rushed out. And in the middle of it all, the Kraken fell onto the ground. For a moment, it looked confused. Its tentacles twisted and curled across the wet concrete floor as it tried to move. The creature had already grown to nearly 4 feet in length. Its glowing markings lit up the dark garage like faint blue lightning. I backed away slowly. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The Kraken lifted its head. Its glowing eyes locked onto me. For a second I thought it might attack, but instead, it started crawling, slowly, toward the open garage door. Day 3. By the next morning, the Kraken had completely changed. After the tank broke, I had managed to drag a large plastic pool into the garage and fill it with water. Somehow, the creature allowed itself to be guided into it. Maybe it instinctively knew it needed water. But what scared me most wasn't the damage from the broken aquarium. It was a Kraken size. Overnight, it had grown again. Now the creature was nearly 6 feet long. Its tentacles were thicker than my arm. When it moved inside the pool, the water sloshed violently against the plastic sides, and the glowing patterns on its body had become much brighter, almost like veins filled with electricity. But the biggest change was its strength. At one point, one of its tentacles accidentally struck the metal shelf in the garage. The entire shelf collapsed instantly. Boxes fell everywhere. Metal clanged against the floor. And the Kraken didn't even seem to notice. That's when I realized something terrifying. This creature was still just a baby. Day 4. Feeding the Kraken had become a serious problem. The amount of food it needed was unbelievable. By day 4, the creature had already eaten 3 bags of frozen fish, 2 whole chickens, and nearly an entire box of shrimp. And somehow, it still seemed hungry. Every time I approached the pool, the Kraken would rise partially out of the water. Its tentacles would stretch toward me, curling in the air like giant snakes. At first, I thought it was being aggressive. But after watching carefully, I realized something strange. It wasn't attacking. It was recognizing me. The Kraken had started associating me with food. In its mind, I was a threat. I was a provider. And that realization made things even more dangerous, because the creature was growing larger every single day. And eventually, it might start seeing me as food too. Day 5. That night, I woke up to a loud crash. For a moment, I thought someone had broken into the house. But when I looked outside my bedroom window, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The garage door was open, completely ripped off its hinges. I ran outside as fast as I could. The plastic pool was overturned. Water covered the entire floor. And the Kraken was gone. My mind started racing. The creature had grown to nearly 8 feet long. If it escaped into the neighborhood, it could cause chaos. I grabbed a flashlight and ran toward the nearby drainage canal that connected to the ocean. And that's when I saw it. The Kraken was halfway inside the canal. Its massive tentacles were dragging its body through the shallow water. The glowing patterns along its skin reflected off the dark surface of the canal. For a moment I just stood there, watching it. The creature looked back at me. Our eyes met, and something strange happened. The Kraken didn't attack. Instead, it slowly slid deeper into the water, almost like it was saying goodbye. Within seconds, the creature disappeared beneath the surface, and the canal became quiet again. Day 6. For the next 24 hours, I didn't see the Kraken. Part of me hoped it had simply swum out to the open ocean, but another part of me couldn't stop thinking about how fast it had been growing. If it kept evolving at that same rate, the creature could become enormous, much larger than anything the ocean had ever seen. And then, something happened that confirmed my worst fear. That evening, local news reports started appearing online. Several fishermen had reported strange activity offshore. Huge waves forming suddenly, boats rocking violently even though the sea was calm. And one fisherman claimed something massive had brushed against the bottom of his boat. Most people assumed it was just a large whale, but I knew better. Day 7. The final confirmation came 1 week after the egg hatched. Early that morning, I returned to the same beach where I had found the egg. The ocean looked peaceful again, almost exactly like the night I discovered it. For a moment, I wondered if the entire experience had just been some strange dream. But then the water started moving. A massive ripple spread across the surface of the ocean. Then another. Then another. Suddenly something enormous rose from beneath the waves. Tentacles. Huge ones. Each one thicker than a tree trunk. They rose high above the water before crashing back into the sea. The surface exploded with waves. Seagulls scattered into the sky. And for a brief moment, I saw it. The Kraken. No longer a baby. The creature had grown to a size that was almost impossible to comprehend. At least 50 feet long. Maybe more. Its glowing blue markings illuminated the ocean like lightning beneath the water. The Kraken lifted its massive head above the surface. And somehow, even from that distance, I felt like it was looking directly at me. Then the creature slowly turned and disappeared back into the depths of the ocean. The waves calmed. The beach became silent again, as if nothing had happened. But I knew the truth. Somewhere out there in the deep ocean, a fully grown Kraken was now swimming freely. And the scariest part? It had only taken 7 days to grow that large, which meant one thing. The egg I found on the beach might not have been the only one.